Welcome back to WD.
FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. We're your hosts, Brie Bertolacini, Marketing Manager.
And Chris Mullen, Senior Marketing and Communications Coordinator at the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Happy July, Chris. I am so glad to be back. And here on this month's Museum Musings podcast, you leave today and enter a world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy. July 17th marks Disneyland's 68th anniversary. I know, Chris, you and I are both big Disneyland fans, so it's a good time to take a walk down memory lane and reminisce on Disneyland's opening day.
Well, on July 17th, 1955, Disneyland had a press preview that was not intended to be the public opening of the park. The press preview had a myriad of complications that included thousands of uninvited guests finding their way into the park, areas of the park unfinished, attractions breaking down, and not enough food or drinks to accommodate all the guests. July 18th was the first time ticketed guests could visit the park. Disneyland was a work in progress, but Walt was dedicated to creating a clean and fun environment for families, young and old.
Chris, speaking of opening day, of the opening day attractions that debuted on July 17th, 1955, which one is your favorite?
I want to point out for our listeners that Bree sent me an early version of the script, and she said, I know that you're picking Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, so don't even try to pick anything else. And that was a correct assessment. My favorite is the only ride at Disneyland, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. The experience of taking Toad's journey in a motor car that he's framed for stealing is delightfully absurd. You end up in hell, which is, and I cannot emphasize enough, has no textual basis in the film and was entirely an invention for the theme park attraction. Walt signed off on an original depiction of hell in his family park, which is just so great. And people were really upset when it was removed from Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World in Florida, which speaks to its enduring popularity, even as the film it's loosely based on has not matched the popularity of its Fantasyland Dark Ride contemporaries. If loving this attraction was against the law, then I'm guilty. That is all. That is all.
Well, that was a great pick. To be quite honest, Chris, I was not one of those angry people who was upset that the ride was leaving Magic Kingdom. Unfortunately, I did have a little party hat and was like, hurrah. So I apologize. Mr. Toad just isn't quite my cup of tea. I'm usually up for some kind of unbirthday mayhem behind Mr. Toad with Alice in Wonderland, that dark ride and the teacups. I know there is, many dozens of you who just love the Mr. Toad Wild Ride.
Dozens of us. Man, we're us toadies are catching strays over here.
Well, we made time for you on this podcast today, really hyping Mr. Toad up today. But for my favorite opening ride attraction, this ride is still a fan favorite. It's Peter Pan's Flight. And it is always consistently a 40-minute wait time every time I walk into Fantasyland. This dark ride is unique because instead of riding a rail on the ground like other dark ride attractions, the ship is suspended from an overhead rail, giving you the feeling of flying through the skies over London and Neverland. I just absolutely love it. Can't get enough of Peter Pan's Flight.
Well, with that, I think it's time to do a roundup of museum highlights. Join us in celebrating our latest special exhibition, Disney Cats and Dogs, with a month-long screening of 101 Dalmatians, the 1961 animated version. Visit our calendar at waltdisney.org/calendar for showtimes. Well, moving on to exhibitions now, we have 2 exhibitions currently on view. Pencils and Passion, a student art exhibition, is currently on view in our lower lobby gallery now through October 1st, 2023. This special exhibition presents student-created traditional and digital artworks, including animated short films, which have been produced over the past decade at both the Walt Disney Family Museum and on location at partner schools and organizations. Pencils and Passion is free to view.
Disney Cats and Dogs is currently on view in the Diane Disney Miller Exhibition Hall now through January 14th, 2024. This traveling exhibition includes over 3,000 archival reproduction artworks of some of Disney's most famous animated cats and dogs.
And speaking of Disney Cats and Dogs, last month for our Collections Clash, we celebrated our favorite animated cats and dogs featured in the exhibition. Here are the results. Round 1 was between my pick of Pluto, that received 79% of the votes, and your pick of Lucifer from Cinderella, that received 21% of the votes.
Woof. For round two, it was close between my pick of Marie from the Aristocats that received 44% of the votes and your pick of Lady from Lady and the Tramp that received 56% of the votes.
That was close, but, our audiences love a leading lady.
Yes.
So. For the final round, it was between my vote of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland that received 44% of the votes, and your pick of Nana from Peter Pan that received 56% of the votes. Coincidence that both round 2 and 3 had the same voting margins, just flipped.
I feel like the same people voted the exact same way, just opposite here. A fun little coincidence. Well, congrats, Chris, on your win again. Not bitter. It's okay. So we're starting the month anew. So I'm excited to get into this collections clash with you. This month, in celebration of the 4th of July, we are still feeling patriotic and thought it would be a fun way to highlight objects that showcase Walt's own patriotism. Our galleries have many moments that highlight Walt's love for America, from volunteering in World War I to lending the talents of his studio to the American war effort in World War II. In 3 rounds, Chris and I will pick objects, and you, the audience, will get a chance to pick your favorite on our Instagram story. Chris, since you won last month, you get to go first.
Well, earlier in the episode, we talked about great attractions, and with my first pick, I'm adding another underrated gem, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. The case in Gallery 9 features a frame for the life-size Lincoln figure, as well as a bust of Lincoln's head designed by Disney legend Blaine Gibson.
That is such a great pick, Chris. I will say that was on my list. Oh, man, that was good.
Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, an attraction featured in the 1964-65 New York World's Fair in the Illinois Pavilion, was a very personal project for Walt. President Lincoln was one of Walt's childhood heroes. When he was a young boy, he performed the Gettysburg Address in a full Lincoln costume for his class and was so well received that he performed encores for the other classes as well. Long before the New York World's Fair, Walt had the idea for a Hall of Presidents attraction to be called One Nation Under God for Disneyland. He had the Imagineers start with Abraham Lincoln. When Walt invited the head of the New York World's Fair, Robert Moses, to tour the studio, he was so impressed by One Nation Under God, he insisted on including it in the fair. While Walt appreciated the gesture, he knew that he would not be able to complete the entire show within the given time frame, and thus a show involving solely Lincoln was born. During this new show, a seated Abraham Lincoln stands, gives a speech made of excerpts of different Lincoln speeches, and then sits back down, accompanied by a rendition of Battle Hymn of the Republic. For the attraction, Lincoln's face was sculpted by Disney legend Blaine Gibson using a life mask made in 1860 by the sculptor Leonard Volk. Another Disney legend, James Algar, compiled the speech. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln opened at Disneyland on July 18th, 1965.
There's so much to love about Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and I highly recommend people seek it out especially during the summer months at Disneyland. It's, a nice place to cool off and getting some of that American history. I just really love all the stories of people just in disbelief when Lincoln stood up and people throwing things at him, thinking that he was just a performer and not an audio animatronic. And I think today, I know I have taken for granted just the art of audio animatronics. And we, in Magic Kingdom have the full Hall of Presidents as, Walt kind of envisioned. And they look so realistic and amazing. So great pick. Well, my first pick is Walt's Presidential Medal of Freedom. This award is on display in our awards lobby and is the nation's highest civilian honor. It is presented to individuals who have made exemplary contributions to the prosperity, values, or security of the United States, world peace, or other significant societal, public, or private endeavors. Now, Chris, since you picked this for one of our past collections clash in the awards, I did some additional digging, so hopefully we won't get some repeat facts in here so people can learn a little bit more. In September of 1964, Walt Disney was presented with the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Lyndon B. Johnson at a ceremony in the East Room of the White House. Walt's achievements were described as, quote, artist and impresario. In the course of entertaining an age, he has created an American folklore. The Presidential Medal of Freedom was first issued 1 year prior in 1963. President John F. Kennedy was the first president to select recipients for this award. Walt was one of 30 recipients to receive this high distinction. At the ceremony, the New York Times reported that President Johnson said of the group's achievements, quote, have made freedom stronger for all of us, end quote. A list of recipients ranged from Nobel Prize-winning author John Steinbeck to Helen Keller, leader in assisting the blind and deaf, abstract impressionist painter Willem de Kooning, and Pulitzer Prize-winning poet and biographer Carl Sandburg. Also notable, he wrote a biography on Abraham Lincoln. So tying it back in this round. President Johnson ended the ceremony by saying, quote, "Our glory is peace, not war. Our greatness is in people, not power. The history of America is a history of outstanding achievement by individuals. It was this conviction that led President Kennedy to the establishment of the Medal of Freedom as our highest civilian honor for outstanding individuals. On the talents of such citizens rests the future of our American civilization, for it is from the genius of the few that we enrich the greatness of the many," end quote.
Well, that is a great pick. The Presidential Medal of Freedom can be used in so many different categories, I think, of our collections clash. So I think it's always appropriate, especially one with this month's theme. So great pick. And since it is a snake style draft, you get the next pick as well.
For my next pick, I'm going with the 48-star flag on display behind the Ford Model T ambulance in our first gallery. This flag was gifted to Walt by Alice Howell in the 1940s. Harriet Alice Howell was a professor of elocution at the University of Nebraska, and during this First World War, she volunteered as a canteen worker for the American Red Cross. During her time working in Neufchâteau in eastern France, she met young Walt. Walt maintained a friendship with Howell over the years, and she would visit him in California and regularly correspond. The special flag once flew over her Red Cross canteen in France during Walt's time volunteering for the American Red Cross during World War I. Alice wrote to Walt saying, quote, "I have a deeply cherished wish that each year on December 5th at least, this flag may wave over the Disney lot," end quote. So it didn't quite wave over the Disney lot, but Walt's daughters, Diane and Sharon, annually ensured that this cherished flag draped over their entrance hall to their walking way home on his birthday. Now the flag is permanently on display in our museum and is always one of my favorite objects to point out in that first gallery. An important part of Alice's story, published in Mindy Johnson's book, Ink and Paint, Women of Walt Disney's Animation, was that Alice, a champion of volunteering, decided to volunteer during World War II, aiding the British War Relief Society. On July 6, 1944, 1 month after D-Day, when the Allies landed at Normandy during the tide of World War II, Howell suffered a stroke. She passed away on July 8th. Her honorary pallbearers included Walt Disney and Walt's hero, General Pershing. A little history on the 48-star flag. It became the official flag of the United States on July 4th, 1912, with the additions of New Mexico and Arizona becoming states. President Taft created an executive order on June 24, 1912, to establish the new proportions of the flag. For 47 years, the 48-star American flag flew longer than any other American flag prior. It lasted through 2 world wars and a total of 8 presidents. In 1959, the flag was updated to 49 stars, and it wouldn't be until 1960 that we would get the 50-star flag we fly today.
Wow. So it only took them a week and a half to decide what the new 48-star flag would look like?
Just reshuffling some stars.
Wow, that is fast. I can't imagine anything today getting done that fast. My second pick will surely take home the gold, the 1960 Winter Olympic torch. Now, Walt served as the chairman of the pageantry committee for the 1960 Winter Olympics, held near Lake Tahoe in what is now known as Palisades, Tahoe, California. As chairman, Walt's duties included staging the opening and closing ceremonies, scheduling nightly entertainment for the athletes, providing decorations to enliven the valley, and taking care of a number of logistical details, including parking concerns, security, and ticketing systems. He enlisted the help of a number of seasoned employees of WED Enterprises, Walt's namesake company in charge of the design and development of Disneyland and forerunner to Walt Disney Imagineering. The WED artists' and designers' knowledge and experience with similar challenges proved useful during the planning of the Olympic Games. Veteran Disney artist John Hench designed the 1960 Winter Olympic torch, which can be seen on display in the museum at the bottom of the ramp at Gallery 9. Hench's impressive 65-year tenure with the company spanned positions in the animation department, in special effects for live-action films, and at WED working on Disneyland. The Olympic torch is arguably one of his most distinguished design accomplishments. Though the design was modeled after the torches for the 1948 and 1956 Olympiads, Hench decided on a slightly smaller version that would be easier for torchbearers to carry. The earlier, taller models proved to be difficult to manipulate as they were top-heavy when filled with fuel. Hench also added black tape to the top part of the shaft to enable runners to pass the torch easily and ensure a stable grip. A number of subsequent torch designs would be greatly influenced by Hench's 1960 model. In 1990, Hench was inducted into the prestigious Disney Legend program, joining the ranks of the great Disney designers, artists, and performers over the ages.
That was such a great pick. I always love pointing out the Olympics. It's like, what didn't Disney do? What important cultural event wasn't Walt Disney a part of during his lifetime? And this is such a great example of that. And since this is the last round, you have the first pick.
For my last pick, I'm returning to Disneyland with a poster of America the Beautiful, a film that played in the Circarama Theater in Tomorrowland. This poster is not on display in our galleries, so it's a WDFM podcast exclusive. It's got the stars, it's got the stripes, and I think it's got enough to win this category. The Circarama film process, utilizing 11 cameras mounted on a circular rig to produce a film that could be projected in 360 degrees, was developed by Disney legend Ub Iwerks, also known as the Hand of Mickey Mouse. The process was later updated to utilize 9 cameras, which was then called CircleVision 360, in part due to complaints from the owners of the similar-sounding Cinerama. America the Beautiful was a Circarama film taking a tour of the United States that first premiered at the Brussels World's Fair in 1958 and was brought to Disneyland in 1960, replacing Tour of the West. It was reshot as a CircleVision 360 film for the 1967 Tomorrowland reboot. While the CircleVision Theater at Disneyland is long gone, CircleVision 360 films live to this day in the China and Canada pavilions at Epcot.
And fun fact, if you look up in our Gallery 9 galleries, you can see the CircleVision 360 cameras.
Yes, thank you, Ub Iwerks. A contribution to the company of among Ub's many contributions that is not talked about enough. The man knew his cameras.
Well, for my final pick, what's more patriotic than a document that proves you are an American citizen? Walt's passport. Now, his passport has a fun story and even includes a forgery. When World War I began, Walt was determined to get involved. He was 16 at the time, and you had to be 18 to enlist. Still to this day, still the rules. 2 of Walt's older brothers joined the military. Raymond joined the Army, and Roy was enlisted in the Navy. Walt was eager to take part in the same adventures as his brothers. He told his parents, quote, "I don't want my grandchildren asking me, why weren't you in the war? Were you a slacker?" Walt was determined to get into uniform, and even though he only completed 1 year of high school, he knew he couldn't go back. He was destined to go overseas to be a part of World War I and America's war effort. Walt's friend, Russell Moss, found out that you could be 17 and sign up for the American Red Cross. They signed up under assumed names, but then realized they needed parent signatures and passports since it was a volunteer unit. The American Red Cross had an age requirement of 17, and Walt was still 16. So Walt went to his parents to sign an affidavit for his passport. His father, Elias, was against it since he already had 2 sons enlisted in the war and didn't want the possibility of losing another. His mother, Flora, saw Walt's determination and signed for both herself and Elias. This was not the only forgery that happened. She wrote out that her son was born December 5th, 1901, still making Walt a year too young. But when she turned around, Walt picked up a pen and made the 1 into a 0, making him 17. You can see this forged passport on display in our first gallery where it says 1900.
Now it's time for our honorable mentions. These will not be up for voting. My first honorable mention are the World War II insignias. Throughout the war, the Walt Disney Studios contributed in a variety of ways without earning a profit. Completing all work at cost was part of its contribution to the war effort. Disney designed more than 1,200 insignia for military units at an average cost of $25 each. As reported in Bob Thomas's Walt Disney: An American Original, Walt said, quote, "Those kids grew up on Mickey Mouse. I owed it to them." During this unique period in animation history, the Walt Disney Studios functioned as a morale builder for both the civilian public and deployed Allied troops. Walt knew that cartoons would be an ideal medium for communicating with the American people in an uncomplicated and amusing manner about war-related issues and anxieties. In addition to the short films and military insignia produced, Disney characters appeared in a variety of home front initiatives, from advertisements, magazines, and stamp books to government posters promoting tax payment, food recycling, rationing, war bond sales, and farm production. Our 2021 to 2022 special exhibition, The Walt Disney Studios and World War II, went more in depth on this fascinating and little known time period for the Walt Disney Company, including 550 examples of these rare historical objects and film clips.
My first honorable mention is a fascinating pamphlet we have on display in our World War II section of our galleries titled Dispatch from Disney. This 1943 publication was distributed to Disney employees who were serving the war effort. This is just a really interesting object that highlights messages from the studio about what they were doing towards the war effort, as well as offer messages from other Disney service members around the world so they all could communicate to each other in this one pamphlet. This pamphlet must have been a much needed insight on what was going on back in the United States and how their coworkers were supporting the war effort. The first section includes an introduction by Walt. There was an article on the power of animation to educate that was penned by Major Alexander P. de Seversky, the author of Victory Through Air Power. There was a cartoon feature by Roy Williams. Most may know him as the Big Musketeer. There are great caricatures throughout the entire pamphlet. There's one section highlighting some Disney employees who were World War I veterans, and it was titled, If Our World War I Vets Had Looked Then as They Look Now. And one of them was being Walt's older brother, Roy, who served in the Navy. And the caricatures were of the employees as then, current day, elder gentlemen who were, too old to serve in World War II. And they were in their uniforms that they wore for World War I. The other three featured were Perce Pierce, Ben Sharpstein, and Jack King.
That is a really cool pamphlet. I walk by it every time and regret that I don't take a closer look at it. Well, for my second honorable mention, you earlier mentioned the 48-star flag, but I'm going to do the Ford Model T ambulance right in front of the flag in Gallery 1A. I figure that since it's not truly the ambulance that Walt drove in France, it wouldn't be an official pick, but it's still a great artifact and visual component within our museum's tone-setting first gallery. By the end of Walt's freshman year, war fever sweeping across the country, World War I is raging, and Walt is anxious to take part in America's effort. Ultimately, by the time Walt arrives in France, one day before his 17th birthday, the armistice had already been signed. So, for the next 11 months, he drives ambulances like the Ford Model T on display, as well as other vehicles. He chauffeurs various Red Cross officials and dignitaries, including the son of American war hero General Pershing that we heard about earlier. During this time, Walt continues to hone his drawing skills, sketching designs on the ambulances, creating drawings for the canteens, and even painting designs on the leather windbreakers worn by his fellow volunteers. He receives positive feedback for his work, and that motivates him to start a career as an artist when he returns back to the States.
My next honorable mention is the handwritten short essay on display from Mexican painter Diego Rivera titled Mickey Mouse and American Art. In this essay, Rivera discusses the art, style, techniques, characteristics, and values of animated cartoons. He says, quote, "The aesthetes of that day will find that Mickey Mouse was one of the genuine heroes of American art in the first half of the 20th century. Aesthetes meaning a person who has a special appreciation of art and beauty." This 9-page handwritten essay was written with black ink on letterhead that reads, Barbizon Plaza, Central Park South, New York. What's more American than Mickey Mouse? Even Diego Rivera revered Walt's creation, and you can read the full essay in our galleries next to our Fantasia display.
Well, my last honorable mention is not on display in our galleries, an award of merit for displaying flags of our country and state given to Walt by the San Francisco-based Native Sons of the Golden West. The certificate reads, quote, "Presented to Walt Disney in recognition of outstanding performance in the display of our national colors and state flag, not for the physical beauty alone, but for what they profess, the determination that a free government may always be in this land of ours, and the memory of the pioneers who built this great state of ours." End quote. According to this group, Walt flew his flags at an award-winning level. Leave it to the United States of America where flying flags could be a competitive category. I think that's what the Founding Fathers envisioned. But I don't know. Let's go to the American Adventure at Epcot and ask Ben Franklin.
I love that. It's such a random, I think of all of Walt's awards, we keep finding just very random certificates. Every, which organization that was very interested in just giving an award to Walt Disney. I love it. Well, for my last honorable mention, I'm going with the small show of patriotism with a miniature mug with an American flag hand-painted on it. This little patriotic mug is amongst a collection of Walt's miniatures on display in our galleries. This white mug has gold detailing on the bottom and on the rim, and then a flag painted waving in the wind on the outside. If you can recall our Miniature May episode, this is a repeat of an honorable mention for me, but I just can't resist talking again about this adorable mug collection.
Yes. Well, and leave it to you to pick a miniature as your last honorable mention.
Exactly. Always taking it small.
Yes. Well, and that brings us to the end of our Collections Clash and our episode. Visit our Instagram stories today to vote on your favorite objects or email us at podcast@wdfmuseum.org to cast your votes.
Thanks for tuning in to WD-FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at WDF Museum for all the latest updates.
This has been a salute to all nations, but mostly America. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, keep moving forward.
Goodbye.
Bye.